It's me, Katy. So far in this podcast journey, we've had the pleasure of interviewing artists from America's favorite high five, Michigan. But today we get to talk to someone from a distant land. That's right, Maryland. If you're part of the darker scene, i.e. goth and industrial, then the name Stephen Archer is nothing new to you. You may know him best from projects like Stoneburner. With many hands and many projects in the scene, Stephen is an interesting piece of chaos in the scene. How so? Well, let's talk about it. Stephen, would you please say hi to everybody? Introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Archer. I do myriad things. I'm a author, musician, artist, painter. I make stuff is really the simplest way to put it.
So, from the outside looking in, you're one of the busiest people in the scene. You're a creator of many mediums, and it all seems to revolve around music. How did you get into this whole thing?
I've been doing art from go. I remember sitting on the floor of my grandparents' house at 6 years old drawing stuff. I was in college art classes at 16. I was showing in galleries at 16. Eventually, I went to Corcoran in DC for fine arts painting. So I've got a degree in fine arts from there. The music part of that, the thing is, for me, all of it's the same thing. It's just different mediums. So, there are certain things that I can say with one thing that's easier with another, or vice versa. I've always been in bands, though. I mean, I was DJing in clubs that I was too young to get into, so at like 18, I think.
So, was it like you had to spin and then get out, or were they cool with you
No, no,
being
I just
there?
came in through the back before the doors opened.
Cool.
And it was, which developed a very convenient, very useful skill of just being able to walk into places and not have anybody stop me. It's like you just know how to walk in and they just assume you're there for a reason, particularly when you kind of look like I do. If you're going to run around looking like this, you must be doing it for a reason, therefore. And I was a singer for a band for assorted bands all through the 90s, none of which went anywhere. But I learned an awful lot of things not to do. And then when my wife Donna and I got together, we had a couple of bands, and the two people that we were working with left and went somewhere else to do something else. And so we were like, okay, well, we're not going to end up in a situation that's an issue again. So I got some gear and we just started learning how to use it. And, I was telling a student of mine the other day who was feeling very insecure about her skill with art and about how she's like, I've never taken classes. I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, everything I do with music is self-taught and I've written music that's gone into space. The classes don't really matter. They're good. Art school is a good thing, but I know plenty of musicians who went to music school thinking it was somehow going to give them a leg up as far as like their rock career went, and it didn't at all. It in the end it comes out to just doing it and how you deal with all of the things that go along with it.
What do you teach?
I privately teach fine art. I would love to teach Art 101 at a community college, but I make more in art sales than I would as a teacher, so it's not worth it. And if I was going to teach it like an accredited school, I have to have a master's, which is fucking stupid because like I'm overly qualified for it. Like I've owned art galleries. I have thrown away more work than most people do in their lives. I've taught for years. Like I have the skill set down, so it really pisses me off that I need a piece of paper to say that I need to in order to teach.
Yeah.
I found there's a school here called Micah Maryland Institute, and they had a program that was actually pretty cool. You were only actually in classes for 2 weeks every year, and the rest of it was studio work. I'm like, that's perfect. That's great because I'm on tour all the time. I do plenty of studio work, so that'd be easy. But I wasn't able to get in that year. And after that, I was just like, I can't justify spending that much money or going that much into debt in order to do something I already know how to do.
Yeah.
At this point, like I'm still actively on the road enough, and I have so many things I want to do that it would be difficult for me to justify taking time away from them.
Yeah. Do you ever see a point where you're like in your padded elbow era, you just want to chill out, drink tea, and teach at a community college or do the master's program?
If at some point I was in a position where I couldn't tour at all, and I just don't see that happening. I'm really tenacious about stuff. Like I had to get a hip replaced last year, just about a year ago. I'm 53, and to get a hip replaced, but we were out on tour right up until that point, and I just made sure that the venues had a stool on stage that I could lean against if I needed to. And now I'm the reason I'm in bed is because I have a herniated disc in my back, and yeah, it's been really awful. But here's kind of an example of what I mean about tenacious, though. I've been in bed for 2 weeks, and I've written a 15-song record, recorded the vocals for it. And it's some of the best stuff I've ever done. Just lying in bed on my back, singing into a USB mic, but it works and it sounds really good. And I'm six more songs into another project and a couple of other things. So like I play video games, right? And Donna was talking about it to somebody. She was like, no, I'm happy when he plays video games because otherwise he's just working all the time. I spent my life to get to where I'm at. Everybody spends their lives to get to where they are. My mother supported me, still supports me, and all of this has gone into this. And I feel like I would be an awful person if I was just like, all right, well, whatever. And also, it's just the practical nature of the fact that I'm our main source of income. So for two people, I have to work because we need to make money to eat. But yeah, in the end, it just kind of like I can't see a point where I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm done with ideas. You know, like this record that I'm in the middle of finishing now. So like we got back we the summer we went out and did a 5 week tour for Donna's new book, doing spoken word for her, which was really cool. And then we got back and we did a few weeks of Stoneburner stuff. And then in October, I started writing the new Stoneburner record, which will come out next September, I think. So since October, I just did the math on this area. Since October, I've written like 40 something songs across like two records and an EP, and a single and some other stuff. And they're all radically, like the Stoneburner stuff is radically different than the stuff that I just did for this new release. Um, and a lot of that just again comes back to having all of these ideas and wanting and different ways of explaining them, explaining those ideas and trying to communicate them to people. Like I was just talking about this today or yesterday, how Stoneburner, the lyrics for it are allowed to be ambiguous. They are allowed to be, open to interpretation because I want them to be. I want the person listening to it to find their own thing with it. Whereas this record that I'm currently working on called The Last Immortal is very much it's a rock album, which I've never done before. And rock, and I mean that in the Roger Waters Pink Floyd sense of the word. I've learned a lot doing it because it's by comparison so much simpler than industrial stuff. Industrial stuff, I've got like 20 tracks of, drums and jackhammers and, cement mixers. And with this, it's like guitar, bass, maybe a keyboard, vocals, drum, that, and melodies and stuff as opposed to just noise. So from a construction standpoint, it's much more minimal, which is very interesting. But lyrically, I have since it basically tells the story about it's a way for me to express my frustration and anger, like a Stoneburner is too, with the state of the world at the moment. And it's basically this story about an immortal who is born in the 1700s, is basically a piece of shit for a couple hundred years, and then kind of snaps out of it and starts seeing what humans are doing. And it begins with him hearing Moon River from Breakfast at Tiffany's and thinking, well, if this beautiful thing can exist, there must be other things. And so he gets really fascinated by space and the technology that's used. So he's following along. There's an entire song on the record called Brief History of SETI, and that it just catalogs all of the major moments in space exploration. I've even got permission from my friends at Goddard to go down and shoot at NASA, shoot a video for it. But it basically ends with kind of in the very near future where everything is happening as it is now, and a bunch of these fundamentalists are like segregating the world off into different colors and beliefs, and they're like, we want to isolate the planet, so they destroy all the launch platforms and things like that, trying to isolate it from the rest of the universe, kind of just taking a lot of these ideas that you see now to this extreme level, and him kind of basically like, I don't understand what happened. Like you went from this amazing thing that you were doing with science, learning and all these things, and now you're here, and so it's just basically a way for me to talk about that and in a more subtle route than screaming.
With the immortal, when does his life start? Is it of
So
recent history?
yeah, he's born in the 1700s, and he's so what happens is that he gets really fucked up because he is born. He ends up working as a slaver. Excuse me. When the slave ship burns down, he runs to another city on the coast. I have it written down, but it always goes away when I try to think about it. And falls in love. And he and his wife are great until she starts getting into his 60s and 70s, and he looks exactly the same. And he doesn't know why it's happening. And eventually, like, she's dying, lying on her deathbed, and she pulls the priest over, and she's like, "This man's a demon. He stole my youth and my life from me." And so he goes on the run, and he just basically decides, "I'm never going to do that to anyone again." And he doesn't know what's going on. So he spends a couple of 100 years just drinking and being a piece of shit. And the only way he's really able to survive is because, having lived as long as he has, he's very good at reading people. So he's very good at playing cards, and that's how he makes a living. So in 1963, Breakfast at Tiffany's makes it to Spain, which is where he is. Yeah, he's living in a smack house, and there's a bakery right next door, and he hears the single for Moon River being played over and over again, and that's when he starts to sort of snap out of it. And then from there, he ends up in and there isn't even a song about this. It's just me in the writings I've been doing. He ends up in like in Germany in '64, kind of living kind of right across from the wall. And so he begins talking about that stuff, but eventually, yeah, ends up in the US and is following all the science and things like that. I kind of like the idea of coming up with a character that's immortal, and there are a few others floating around that he sort of interacts with, but coming up with a character that's immortal, that lives through these real major historic events and has no interest in them whatsoever, isn't involved with them, barely even notices they happen, until he like actually like comes out of everything. He's just like, yeah, that happened, and whatever. I was drinking. I don't care. I've always been fascinated by removing those things. Like I always thought it'd be really funny to do a book or movie or whatever of a bunch of immortal vampires that just didn't give a shit about being spooky or romantic. It's like, look, no, we do this because we need to survive. That's it. We're not trying to be scary. We just are trying to not be dead, you know.
Yeah, like a whole what is it? Nest of angels.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like from Buffy. I'm very into Buffy
Oh,
right now. Yeah.
I
So
know that that show exists and people enjoy it, but it was never a thing for me.
it's okay. It's
Yeah, yeah,
for the best, probably. It's kind of like if you need a really good camp moment, then the show's pretty funny, but otherwise, it's it's silly. It sounds like the process of writing your albums is really in depth. Like if
yeah,
you
it can
wanted
be.
to, yeah, you could release a whole book with this album.
Well, I
Um,
mean, when I did Red and Tooth and Claw, the EP for Red and Tooth and Claw, it eventually turned into this, you know,
yeah.
and and then the record that was kind of the follow-up for that, Apex Predator, in the liner notes, I mean, there's an entire 10,000 year timeline of a bunch of events that were real and not, that all relate to the stories and the songs. I have a real hard time with the idea of music that has being needing to be shallow.
Right.
I like the idea that you can use it not to just entertain people, but actually talk about real things. And I have a very high standard for the industrial scene, and a lot of people don't live up to it. It makes me very angry because it's just like you can use all of this stuff, and you can write like there's no limit on what you can use for sounds and all of these other things, and this is what you're doing with it. You're concerned about dance floors and writing, I don't know, dirty boys, dirty girls or whatever. Like it's like no, this can actually be something that matters. It can be something that's not just, complaining. I mean, you certainly can, but do it eloquently.
Right. I mean, how long does it take you to do these things? Because you say that kind of since you've been out from your back injury, you've been just churning out songs and stuff. And like,
That one happened real fast. Like I wrote like one or two of the songs before all of this happened, but I mean the majority of that record was written in the last 2 weeks because I didn't really have anything else to do. You
yeah,
know, on average from go, I can do a Stoneburner album in about a month and a half. But that's like my full-time job for that month. Like, or another example is like this is a 200-page book, and it took me 2 months to do it, and that was my job for those 2 months, 8 hours a day or however long, every day doing the artwork for it.
do you set like a timer for yourself or do you just let the creative flow happen?
The thing is done when, well, like in the case of The Last Immortal, when I feel like all the holes are filled in for the story. Whereas like with the Stoner record I did 15 or 18 songs, something like that, knowing that it would be trimmed down to 12.
Yeah. Okay.
The limit is basically, or the stopping point is when I feel like I have 12 songs that I know are going to work, and then I have enough other songs that I feel, like I try and do everything all at once. So this way I've got all the songs for the record, plus I've got stuff for EPs or one-offs or things like that, and they're all just done. I don't have to worry about it anymore. And then it's just comes down to figuring out what are the important points that I'm trying to make with it as I'm doing it, and that way I can kind of prioritize, or what are the songs that are, you know, going to be the most catchy out of this stuff. The only time I would ever put a time limit on something is I'm a big fan of giving yourself rules to work sometimes. Back when I started doing this back in 99, 98, and we had just had our gear and our 4-track and things, I was just, you had to get really creative and learn how all the gear worked and all that stuff because you only had like one synth and a sampler and a drum machine, and effects rack. It's a very limited amount of gear. You had to really learn to make it work. And so I do believe that limitations can force creativity, which I think is great. So sometimes it's a good idea to kind of go, okay, got 6 hours to write a song, go. Start to finish, lyrics, everything, go. One of the assignments I'll give my students sometimes when they're hesitant to put work out there, I'm like, okay, I want you to get online. I want you to say, by the end of this week, I'm posting 7 pieces. I might do one a day, I might not do them all at once. And if I don't do that, call me an asshole because that's a real, public humiliation's a real good motivator. And it's good because you see it. You're able to see yourself do it and it didn't kill you.
Right.
At school, we did this thing in the middle of our junior year, and it was we were going to get everyone to quit that isn't absolutely serious about doing this project, where it was called 50 Works, where you had to do 50 pieces in 3 weeks, which sounds incredibly daunting
Yeah.
um, until after you do it, and then you're like, you do that in 2 days. And they'll give you like 25 starting points for ideas, and then you have to kind of fill in the rest. And then you get to the end of it, and like the night before it's all due, all the students are in the because the studios were 24 hours, which is fucking cool. Um, but all the students were in the studios. Like I remember sitting there, it's like I got a block of wood, wrap it up in wire, dip it in this wax. Okay, there's one more, and you start to kind of go, you can make stuff really fast. The amount of time you spend on something does not necessarily equate to how good it is. Sometimes you can knock something out real fast and it's fucking solid. Years ago, I did this piece that was 5 by 3 feet, and it was just this eviscerated bird painting. And I did the entire thing in like half an hour. And I was sitting there and I was staring at it. I was like, everything about this is telling me it's done, except for the fact that I want to keep working on it. So I had to like pick it up and like lean it against the wall just to like not overwork it. So I keep getting this idea that like the more time you spend on it, the better, or that because you spent time on it, it must be good. When really it just comes down to what the thing is and like, does it work?
Right. Well, okay. So you've been doing this for a while now. You mentioned 98 as a date. So it's a very long time. What would you say are your key peaks and valleys of your experience doing art on like a very professional level?
I mean, there have been some general highlights. I was a staff artist for Weird Tales magazine for a while. That was pretty cool. I wrote music for NASA. I did a video for Alan Parsons. I have played all over the country and all over Europe, and I have had the amazing opportunity of finding out that bands that I am a fan of know and like what we do. Like when we met Rodney from the Dead Milkmen, who's a close friend of us now, but we met him because he was right up front at one of our shows singing our songs.
That's so wild.
Yeah, or yeah, Charles Levi from like everybody. He watching him stand by the side of the stage, watching our entire set and enjoying it. So that's incredibly cool. Or having respect from other producers like Jim Marcus from Warsaw and like who seem to really appreciate what I am doing. That's pretty amazing. Because, again, it's all self-taught. So, and Lord knows I have done it wrong so many ways. A friend of mine once said towards the beginning of my career, was like, Steve, anything we do right, it's because we have done it wrong every way possible. Another example, the guy Mark Allen Miller, who masters and mixes a bunch of my stuff. I started. He put out a record in 1991, I think, for his band called Out called Pepperbox Muzzle. Huge fan of it, and now I'm working with the dude. Or one time I was sitting around and got a text from Chris from Stabbing Westward because he was trying to figure out how to program his lights. So it's always just kind of neat those when you get to know those people as just humans. I think one of the best things I ever really realized, for the most part, in particularly in this scene, all of us are just huge fucking nerds. And the ones who have been in it for a long time, it's like it just comes down to they love what they do and they're just trying to do it well and make something that makes sense to them. And kind of once you get past this idea that, well, they're famous, therefore they must be like really full of themselves or whatever. And you do run into those people, which is always annoying. But most of the people, like, they get the joke, and it's just like, yeah, we are famous in that we are, big within this tiny demographic that is so small that the mainstream world doesn't market to it. So it's just, yeah, it's people just doing what they love because it's what they love, no matter what. It's not a trend or it's not a whatever.
Yeah, I've noticed within the like dark scene or goth industrial scene that most people are just super nice and warm and welcoming. It's not that there aren't inflated egos, but those exist everywhere. I've definitely like there's you've talked with Ken a lot. I know. I've been part of. I was like the fly on the wall in the background of some of those interviews. And we've got the event Chaos in town. And if you want to go and you don't necessarily have like all of the like clothes and piercings that people from the outside looking in think you need, they're so warm and welcoming. They just want you to go. They just want you to have a good time and dance with everybody. So,
My whole thing is, I'm just glad anybody gives a shit. Like, it really, like, I've been part of this scene since like, I don't know, 87, 88 or whatever. And like, it just drives me nuts when people are like, well, you have to dress like this or you can't like this or that. I'm like, oh, fuck you. You know, like, who gives a shit? Like, it's not like if somebody, if somebody over there, likes Bauhaus and Lady Gaga, it's somehow siphoning the cool from you. Like fuck you.
I mean, I can definitely understand liking a lot of different things, especially in the modern era. It's like I feel like things are a lot less siloed now that you've got a lot more access. And like it kind of circles back to your point about giving yourself rules or even like challenges that when you were trying to do things in the past, there was a lot more restriction. It wasn't necessarily that you didn't have the ability to do all of these things, but maybe not access to all of the tools to do it. And now the tools are inexpensive or really easy to obtain. So, how do you feel about like that type of transition that like a lot of the people who are now getting into it are kind of getting into it with this platform that's a little bit of kind of a leg up that you've got all of these resources
That's
now.
the point of tools.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire reason tools exist is to make things easier. Yeah, you know what, I genuinely feel bad for people that take those things personally. Um, and not because it tends to mean that they see what they do as part of who they are or as an aspect of who they are. And that they are somehow wrapped up in all of that. Like if you're a young artist and you make something and somebody doesn't like it, you could take it very personally. All of the artists that I know, like that are out and working and just, have been in it forever, we're all just like, cool, yeah, go for it. Fuck yeah. Do it. It's like I always equate it to the first day of art school, first week of art school, when everybody shows up and you may have been hot shit in your high school, but guess what? Now you are in with the hot shit of every other high school. And that girl down there is 16 years old and can do fucking Rembrandts. So maybe, you need to realize that it doesn't equate to who you are as a person. When we did our first demos for Songs from a Dead City, which was the first ego likeness demos, I remember walking to the drugstore to buy a brick of tapes in order to reproduce them from our 4-track and thinking, well, this could be a cool thing, or maybe not. And somebody's going to come up and say, hey, it's not very good, and I'll just be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Next one will be better. But it exists, and it's a thing, and I made it, and like it or don't. And 20 years later, Metropolis put it out on CD. So it's okay to not be good at something you're not good at. Like you're learning, that's fine. I mean, there's shit that I'm still figuring out how to do. Whatever, you're always figuring it out. But, it doesn't make you less of a person. And somebody else who's using a tool to make something isn't isn't a better artist than you are. They don't have the same technical skill, but maybe this gave them a way to get an idea out that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So you never know. Like, and I don't know, it's a weird thing. So we had this we're put out through a publisher named Raw Dog Screaming Press. Do you know Wool, the science fiction book? Now it's called Silo. Okay. So when Wool started, it was just a guy putting stuff up on a website as a blog, just a story, and it became a hit. People liked it and turned into books. So I was at a industry convention for publishers, the people who they signed, and had just recently published his book, and he was getting really drunk and almost belligerent with our publisher. Like, well, why am I not famous yet? Like pointing at Hugh Howey and be like, why is this not me? Why is this not me? And I had to like really just pull him aside. I pull like off the publishing. I was just like, look, man, that was a one in a bazillion chance. And, maybe the reason that it's, creates buzz is because it's good. It's good. And it just happened to hit at exactly the right time. Just because you wrote it, and you got published, so it's, they like it, but that doesn't mean that it's speaking to people in the same way, and you have no control over that whatsoever. So, like, the best anybody can do is you just make it and put it out and make it and put it out and make it put. There's a great quote from Kenny Rogers about that. He's like, you don't, fame doesn't find you. You just stick around long enough and hopefully you'll find, you don't find fame. Eventually, if you stick around long enough, fame will find you, or not. But what else are you going to do? Like, I, I'm always amazed by, I've seen bands do this kind of thing where like they'll put something out and they're like, oh, well, I didn't get famous fast enough. And then they just quit. I'm just like, what did you expect to happen? Look around you. How many other bands are just as good as you are? And, you know, 10 people listen to them. That can't be your carrot. You make the thing because it needs to exist. And if you're doing it for any other reason, then it's disingenuous to the work itself and to the audience that is listening to it or looking at it, because then it's no longer art, then it's product, and that's a different thing. And it's fine to make product, but don't turn around and tell people it's anything other than that.
Yeah. I feel like this is probably going to be a very harsh digression, but to keep on the path of like genuine nature, that like there's an artist out there whose work has always come from a very genuine place. I need to know, how did you come up with the band name Stoneburner? Because like from that point, you've been putting out incredibly honest material. I mean, like some of it is like a little bit of a fantasy, where it's like story driven and stuff, but it all comes from a point of truth. And I know that there are as many albums that are about like politics or phase of life as there are like the story driven ones.
Well, ego likeness also is, I mean, Donna is an incredibly honest writer.
Yeah, Ego
And
Likeness is amazing. Just for the viewers out there, please check out Ego Likeness and Stoneburner because they're both amazing projects.
um, well, okay, and both the names came from the same place actually. One day we had had this other band called Seraphim Gate prior to that, and then those people left, and so we were sitting around trying to come up with a name for our band. I just happened to be reading Dune at the time, and Donna picks up the dictionary. She's going through the back of it, and she's like, "Ego likeness, that's it." I'm like, "You sure?" She's like, "You picked the last one. This one's mine." I'm like, "Okay." And an ego likeness in the world of Dune is a portrait, not of the way that somebody looks, but they're essentially their essence, their ego, just who they are. Stoneburner is also from Dune, and it's a banned form of nuclear weapon uh, that ends up blinding Paul Atreides. So I collect band names and then wait for the band to present itself. Um, I knew what Stoneburner looked like, the logo for it, and what it sounded like 3 years before I had actually written anything for it. And every so often I would sit there and try and write something that fit that idea. Didn't happen, didn't happen, didn't happen. And then one day I had sampled a bunch of stuff out of the movie Dune and ramped it up to like 145 BPM, turned the shield wall into a bass sound. And within a month, I had two records of it. I've got another band called Ocellus that I just started working on material for. And so Ocellus, on the back of tiger ears, there are little white dots. And on large cats in general, there are little white dots called ocelli. And they are the false eyes that exist there to scare predators from behind it. And I was like, that's fucking metal. That was sitting around for a while, and then one day I started working on this really ugly abstract metal stuff. So I was able to put that on it as a name. So I think that naming bands is incredibly important, and you have to be really good and careful with it. There are many, many things to think about with that, and you know, and also just having multiple projects, being able to kind of plop them into different categories for different things. Like the stuff I'm doing on with, the Last Immortal definitely wouldn't fit with any of the other bands, and vice versa. I know I was talking to somebody recently. God, what were they saying? They're like, Cinder Block, that's a great name. I'm like, no, it's a horrible name for a band. I was like, I can guarantee you there is a band called Cinder Block in every city in this country, and you haven't heard of them because they never go anywhere. I was like, also, it's impossible to look it up.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it's like today we have to think about SEOs. So when you are conceptualizing this album, did you have like the whole thing kind of charted out in your mind before you started?
no, I had originally in my head it was going to be a much sadder record than it ended up being because it was based on this idea about how, we as humans, we're all immortal, watching everyone around us slowly die until we're no longer immortal, and then that's it. And so it was kind of trying to take that and extrapolate it into a larger idea. I knew how it ended before I knew anything else, and that happened by accident. Like a few months ago, I wrote this one song, and it bottled up that entire story perfectly. And it's basically the main character and his partner essentially just running out of this kind of, I don't know, metaphysical door from our world into this sort of dream space. But it summed up how I feel about everything so well. I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly how it should end. And it's basically her just going, why are you so angry about all this? And it ends with it's like, because as I turned and screamed back at the door, you could have been so much more. And it's just kind of looking back on the state of the world and kind of going, you could be doing so much more than what you are doing. And that's a major point for me that is so frustrating. Once I had that down, then it was figuring out the other things. Like it was a really cool moment when I hit on the Audrey Hepburn thing because Moon River has always been one of my favorite songs, and I don't remember exactly what it was that popped into my head, but all of a sudden I was like, that's it. That's why he gets clean. It's something that simple, and I feel like it's a very weirdly human reason for it because Audrey Hepburn in general represents this very pure archetype of person, and as does that song and the hope that's in it. So that was part of it. So and then it was just kind of figuring out other little things like so. I did this children's book years ago called Luna Maris, and also oddly enough, when I had my back was hurt, so I was sitting in this chair and I was drawing out. I draw out all of the pictures of the scenes that I could see and I laid them down. And so I had a beginning and I knew what the ending was going to be. And I put these other scenes in between. And then it was just kind of an issue of going, okay, how do I get from here to here? Draw that one in, okay. And so it was a very kind of similar sort of experience with this. He lives through a lot of wars, and so there's one of the songs is the chorus is flags go up, flags come down, but nothing changes here on the ground. And so it's just him kind of experiencing the tedium almost of that, or watching people around him die. And there's a song called Our Only Happy Ending, which is people say strangers die every day, but the ones you love just should just fade away into the gray of darkness. Into the gray of time, they blend in our only happy ending. So it's kind of learning how to cope with death from that standpoint. And then there's fill-in songs where like at one point all the living mortals have this press conference and they're basically saying, okay, look, I know our existence throws science on its head. We get it. There's a line that's like, we will allow any test that is humane, but first you have to listen to us because this planet has gone insane. And so it's talking about like all of those things, and then that press conference ends up getting blown up by the insurrectionists, and it's just him and his partner running to try and get out to get to this door. So I had to kind of write a song that happened in between that press conference and then the final piece of the door. And so that came out of like me picturing. I was like, okay, so what's a good reference for that song? And "Run Like Hell" by Pink Floyd was. I was like, I need something that sounds like that or feels like that, has that level of tension to it. And I think I got something pretty cool. It goes through that sort of feel to it, but then it breaks down into this very angry Rage Against the Machine rant at the end of it, in the middle of this kind of otherwise fairly staid rock album. So yeah, there's a lot of just kind of figuring out how to, or even the beginning. How do you tell the story of somebody, falling in love and watching their partner die and then running off, in one song. So it was a very interesting experience. Or even the Audrey Hepburn portion where he comes to go through this has the single best chorus I think I've ever written in my life. It's Audrey Hepburn and me, we got a thing going from a Cracker Jack box to the shit um, to the Tiffany showroom, from the fire escape to the weather report to our little cat lost in the storm. And it's this really great, huge chorus. But writing that out and figuring out how to get to that chorus to so having giving him a partner that which he's dialed talking back and forth. Like the second chorus is basically, wow, so she just looked in there and just vowed to clean you up. She must have been a saint. And he's like, no, no, this is all the things that she was doing in the movie and that sort of thing. So it's it's been a lot of fun, a lot of interesting things.
Yeah. So, like, okay, when you think about it, do you think about it as like just a rock album or a rock opera? And with that same thought, do you like visualize it as a movie or a stage performance?
You know, I wouldn't say call it a rock opera. I'd call it a concept record.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Sorry, my bad.
no, no, it's fine. Uh, it's I don't know if it would work well as a movie, or somebody else made that comment too. But I have no idea if it would work as that or not. Like whereas Red and Tooth and Claw, because I've got all the imagery for it, I know exactly how that story works in a larger scale. Like I think that that would be a really fascinating movie to try and do, although certainly outside my budget. So instead of doing something like that, I've been writing up little vignettes of pieces of conversation, or I wrote up a whole thing that's I don't know a dozen pages or whatever of where another immortal recognizes him in a bar after like he worked on the slaver with him, and so he basically just pulls him out of this bar, throws him in a shower, and just makes him clean up, and then takes him downstairs to try and get through to him that he doesn't have to be living this life. So there's all of these other little pieces of the story that I'm filling out, that I think, whenever it gets released in some form, I will want to make available. I mean, like I'm a big fan of that sort of stuff. Like with the book for Red and Tooth and Claw, there's QR codes on it, and there's download two additional downloadable chapters that weren't in the physical book because it just would have taken up too much space and cost too much money. But that expound on the story and again try and kind of pin it down to more of a real thing. Like the last chapter, the DLC chapter, is a magazine called Decade that takes place 10 years after the events in the book, and it's looking back on everything that happened and kind of looking at the global ramifications of, well, what does happen when a half-mile high wolf destroys a third of the United States as far as the global economy goes? How did the Catholic Church respond? What kind of conspiracy theories came out of it? That sort of thing. Um, Stuff that I personally find interesting, and I hope other people do as well. So,
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like you could link up with Rodney from The Dead Milkman and make a whole like it's world building at its finest. So you guys could do a whole D&D campaign just about
it's
like being in this world.
true. We just did a song together like a week ago that I put out. It was me and Matt from Caustic and Mark from Out. It's called same New Year, same fucking you. And I rebuilt, or I had this idea for the song, and I was like, well, fuck it. And I just took another song that I had written from a few years back, and I just stripped all the vocals out of it and completely just rewrote the vocals, uh, reusing the same music. It's basically my yeah, motherfuck this fucking year and motherfuck the next one too. And while I'm at it, here's a middle finger for motherfucking you. Yeah. So
Perfect.
I've done two joke songs in my career, and you know, but sometimes being funny is the easiest way to laugh at the devil, to
Right.
push back against things.
Since the new year, I've enacted self care Sundays where I kind of set aside some time to do things for myself to make sure that I'm in the right headspace to approach the next week with like positivity and motivation and stuff like that. So, with your really busy schedule, what do you do to set aside time for yourself?
I One of the reasons I like my Steam Deck, 599 from Valve, um, is that uh, if I'm working on something, I can literally just stop and play a game for 20 minutes and then go back to what I was doing. That's kind of it. Like, I don't enjoy watching TV or in general. Like, every once in a while, there'll be something that's specifically cool that I'll want to see or funny. But for the most part, like, I'm not engaged with that. But when I work, I kind of double team it because like when I'm painting, I always am listening to audiobooks constantly. Sometimes when I'm working on music, I'll have an audiobook in one ear. So I'm still doing that. Honestly, a lot of what I try and do, particularly with painting, is to get rid of that. Like the less thinking I am doing and the better. Like my hand knows way more about how to paint than I do. So I try and not be there as much as I can and just let it do what it needs to do. And every once in a while I'll check back in and make sure if I need to adjust something. But I those times where I can just really get lost in a book while I'm working is a great way to do it. I guess I get recharged by doing stuff, like by making things and stuff like that. So for me, that is a very uh, whereas like if I had to go be social or not be doing things, that's when I feel kind of very start to feel very much more drained because I'm literally like, okay, well here's 15 more minutes of my life I don't get back, and I am not doing what I need to be doing, what I should be doing with my life. I am not making something. So that was nothing for me. That was, so.
Normally, I would ask people to like if you're involved in music to recommend musicians and stuff or like other artists, but I kind of want to mix it up a little bit today. I still want three recommendations, but would you mind making two recommendations for audiobooks that are worth a listen and one recommendation for a video game that people should check out?
So there's this guy named Peter Watts who wrote a book called Blindsight. I read it 10 years ago, and the thing that really got to me about it was that it's science fiction, first context story, but I would stop every few pages to look up a concept that he was talking about, and all of them were real. It was just extrapolated 100 years in the future. It's one of the single best science fiction stories I've ever read, to the point that I started writing him and eventually stalked him, booking a show up in Toronto specifically to meet the guy, and we have since become friends. He wrote a short story that goes along with my record, Apex Predator, and he did some dialogue recording for a record I did called Technology Applies Belligerence, and I got the name for that book and some of the ideas from it, or name for that record from that book. So that's one if you're into hard science fiction, and it's got a vampire in it, and that makes it immediately sound really cheesy, but it's not. He does it in a very interesting and cool way. So, and it's got some of the most alien aliens in it. Like their motivation for what's happening is really fascinating to me. So that's one of them. And I'll give you just give you two more real quick. One's called Night Film. It's by Marisha Pessl, and it is kind of an examination of artist as sociopath. It is a detective story that centers around a film director. Or he's trying to figure out how much of the ideas that spread around him, the stories that spread, how much are true and how much are not, and the why of it. So he's kind of like Kubrick on crack. I often will think about that because from an art standpoint, that idea is incredibly appealing. From being a human standpoint, maybe not so much, but I can certainly understand the appeal of like if you could make work completely without morals. Like there are so many things I would try to do that just probably be illegal.
It'll make you think.
The other one is by Donna Tartt, and it's called the Secret History, and that ended up being part of a record that I did called Beauty is Terror, and it's one of the most just I guess they're calling it dark academia, but it's about a murder on a college campus and how how the people deal with it. All three of those are like that, and then Foucault's Pendulum. Those are like my top four books ever. So I highly recommend them to people. And House of Leaves, which they will never be able to make an audiobook out of, uh, or anything other than the book, because the form of the book is part of it. As to video games, I'd love to give you some like really cool abstract thing, but I'll tell you, I really enjoyed both of the God of War games that came out on PC recently.
Yeah, they're great.
Actually, you know what? Here's one. Slay the Princess
Okay.
is it's a kind of a visual novel, but it's very recursive and it's very abstract conceptually. It's got a lot of really interesting ideas to it. And it's all hand drawn. You know, it's just these really simple little drawings, but it's not like anything else that's out there, which is cool. Um, I also was really enjoying recently the what is it, dark horror anthology games have come out. There's one called The Devil in Me, I think, and basically, when you if you look at them, the last two that they did, there are four out, and the last two were really really good, and they're basically just visual novels.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Well, I will definitely be forwarding along all of that to all of my friends who are big into, because it sounds like the one is like kind of paranormal, but then the others are just like kind of crime books,
yeah, oh,
like
yeah, yeah,
more like psychological thriller type of thing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, like Blindsight is essentially the man who mistook his wife for a hat in space. So I mean, it's basically just there's an entire section that's just a catalog of all of the ways you can fuck somebody up by changing brain chemistry. Um, Peter is he's exactly my kind of people. He and I hate everything exactly the same way. He was a marine biologist before he became an author, and so he's just frighteningly intelligent. Um, and he's got like there's a lot of stuff going on in his world, and I can't talk about any of it, but my hope is that you will start to see his name in a much bigger way sooner. But and he deserves it. It's that fucking good. So
Well, I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for more updates from him, and I'll be checking out as many of those books as I can, because this year it's another one of my New Year's resolutions to read more and or listen to audiobooks. I struggle to actually read, so audiobooks are where it's at.
oh, I love audiobooks. I think it's great, and it's just a way of feeling like I'm actually like getting something while while working like that or whatever. Also, like anybody who goes on tour, man, audiobooks are the shit. Like because like I'll be sitting around waiting at a show and there's music, and earbuds in, listening to audiobooks. Show's over, cleaning up the stage, earbuds in, audiobooks. Otherwise, you're just kind of sitting there not doing anything. So it's like your brain's just meh. So having something it adds this kind of cool uh, ongoing thread that runs through everything, and you don't feel like a complete just turd with your brain.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to listen to podcasts or audiobooks, but the others that I've gone on tour with are still very, very in the chatty phase of things.
Mhm.
So we've not had that break. But on that same line of thinking, besides the audiobooks, I like to ask this question every time and kind of reframe it for whoever I'm talking to. Since you tour all the time, what advice would you give to bands who are going on tour the first time?
Don't get your shit stolen. So don't put a bunch of band stickers on your vehicle. When you get into check into the hotel and they ask, "Are you in a band?" Say no. You know, we are artists. Yeah, we do have a band sometimes, but we're out here just carrying some art from place to place because people in hotels will tell their friends, and their friends will come and steal your shit. Um, if you're touring during fall and winter, carry chains. We have an entire emergency kit that lives in the stow and go seating in our van for all that stuff, including shit like Narcan, because you never know, somebody might overdose on something. Um, find out, have a sheet for everybody in the band to fill out. It sounds boring and stupid. Find out what they're allergic to, contact information, all that other shit. Like, don't stay in cities. Like, we, particularly San Francisco, but like, yeah, it is worth it to spend an hour to drive out and find, some other hotel in the middle of nowhere, than staying somewhere else. Um, oh, I don't know what else. Always drink lots of water.
Yeah. What's the longest tour that you've been on? Like, how many days
Two
was
and a
it?
half months once.
Holy shit, dude. I don't understand how people have the stamina. I really, really want to have it, but I mean, we did a 10-day tour and it was like I was so tired by the end of it and my voice, it was gone. I made novice mistakes.
Yeah. Well, you have to learn how to talk at shows. That's part of it too. Is like you can't constantly be trying to be loud when you're talking at shows. Um, and I don't know. I always explain to people, it's like, look, touring, it's like you're exhausted, and that exhaustion, keeping from falling over, is what just keeps you moving forward. Like that's just part of it. Everyone's exhausted, and that's the other thing that you have to remember too when you're on the road. It's like everyone's exhausted. So don't be a dick. Like you have to learn how to to isolate yourself from everybody else on your own. Like you have to find your inner by yourself with music or playing a game or whatever. Nobody gets to complain. Even when they're sick, we have a rule. It's like we have a 3 day rule. It's like, okay, you can be sick for 3 days, but after that, you're gonna have to figure it out. You either need to go to the hospital or you're gonna have to get better, unless
Yeah.
all of us get wiped out by COVID, which happened. So,
Ew. Yeah.
that's different. But like knowing knowing people's mental issues, we were on a tour and had somebody like went fucking off their rocker, a few days in because they just stopped taking meds and they went out wandering around San Francisco. And so, having to deal with that really fucking sucked. Fortunately they weren't part of our machine, but they were part of the tour. And so, the other band had to figure out how to solve all of that. Whenever we bring an opening act out with us, I always try and sit them down ahead of time. I'm like, look, I do not care how big and badass industrial guys you are. If you do not listen to Donna, you will be in trouble. She has bigger balls than all of you combined. And if she says, okay, we need to do this way, there is a reason for it every single time. And if you don't do it, it's going to be bad for you. And we had that happen when we took somebody out and they decided not to gas up when Donna told them. She was like, okay, but we will leave you if you run out of gas. And like we went through the desert and kept going, kept going, kept going. And that they pulled in on fumes and they're like, you were really fucking lucky that you're able to actually get to her, but I'm going to listen to her next time. So, definitely having a good tour manager who knows how the routing works, is able to take, you know, time changes into consideration, all of that shit.
Well, that's all amazing advice. Anyone who's listening could benefit from all of those things. Well, okay. So, in a twofer type question, what can people look forward to in the future with Stoneburner or any of your projects, really? And then, where can people find you so that they can track your progress?
Well, I'm all over Facebook. You can just find me on Facebook under Stephen Archer. Um, right now, there's a cartoon picture of me in the icon. You can look up Ego Likeness. You can look up Red and Tooth and Claw. All the bands are on Bandcamp. Stoneburner's on Cop, Ego's on Metropolis, and then I have my own label called Wolfcore Records that's got everything else. Let's see, the Last Immortal will come out when it's done and it makes sense to put it out. So I'm trying to arrange for something very cool, but it's not likely to happen. So probably some point in the spring I'll put it out. Stoneburner record is currently being mixed by Chris Verena from Nine Inch Nails. That'll be out in September. And we just did a new ego thing for Electronic Saviors, a new Stoneburner song for that. We'll be playing at Mechanismus in July, I think, or something like that. So we'll book some stuff on the way out to that, either ego or poetry or other things. And then hopefully in the fall something big will happen with Stoneburner. It's in the works, but you never know. So it's a lot of it's just seeing how it all plays out and also seeing what happens with my back. So that'll be part of it too. My assumption is it will probably be better by then in some form or another. There's different treatments or surgery. So, it'll be what it is.
My heart goes out to you, man. I hope that you feel better. Well, we've come to the end of the interview. I will give a little bit of advice, but I'll just say it. My advice is the same every week. Be rad, stay chill, try to do the right thing. Now that we've done this interview, I like to spin out to like 30 seconds of a song by you. What song do you think we should feature at the end of this?
Well, the last thing I did was New Year, same fucking you. So that's up on the cop site on Bandcamp.
That's what we're going to do.